So hi everyone, welcome. Today we want to talk about online learning and high impact practices. As you know, we've been asking for a while how we deliver those 8 features of high impact practices in an online environment. And of course, COVID has certainly brought that question to a crisis, but even beyond this pandemic moment, the ability to deliver high impact instructional experiences to online students, it's an issue of equity and accessibility and scaling. And so for all of those reasons, I am so excited to have Janae Cohn with us today to talk about online learning and HIPS. Janae is director of academic technologies at Sacramento State University, and she specializes in instructional design, online learning, and reading and writing in digital environments. So Janae, I'd love to just toss it to you for a quick introduction for those who aren't familiar with your work.
Sure. Thank you, Amy. Thanks for inviting me to be part of this conversation today. So as Amy mentioned, I write and speak about instructional design and digital pedagogy. I've published work in a variety of peer-reviewed journals, and I've also been featured in the Chronicle of Higher Education and Inside Higher Education. I have a book coming out called Skim Dive Surface, Teaching Digital Reading with West Virginia University Press. So that'll be available in June 2021 for those of you who want to dive more deeply into thinking about reading and writing in digital spaces. But which is a great overlap or intersecting point, I should say, with thinking about several high impact practices that might involve reading and writing.
That's wonderful. And so I just want to start by asking you, what are some big questions that you see at the intersection of high impact practices and online learning?
So I think the biggest question for us to consider as we look at what it might look like to teach high impact practices online is how can we take full advantage of the affordances for teaching, learning, and engaging online when scaling out high impact practices at our institutions. When we think about operationalizing high impact practices at our institutions, we often tend to start by thinking locally. What will work on our campus? What will work for our students? Who are the stakeholders involved internally? And those are still good questions to ask. And I think the additional opportunity is to think about who the other audiences are that might be involved when we put our high impact practice online. For example, if we're imagining a service learning project that's being offered in an online context, we might think about the possibilities for engaging students in not just local causes, but national or even international concerns that they can more easily connect to in an online environment. There's a lot of potential for students to get experience working with professionals and researchers around the globe when we really move our operations online. To put it another way, another opportunity we have to take full advantage of being online is to think about the impacts of the projects that students can create online. So for things like writing intensive courses or first-year seminars, where maybe there's a lot of writing involved, we might think about how those writing products might change when they're entirely composed, delivered, and circulated in online environments. We might think about, for example, what it means for writing projects if they're part of engaging with a networked public, what it might mean to incorporate more multimedia into writing projects. For capstone experiences, we might consider whether there are ways to engage with how we communicate and receive information online that might be different than what we do face-to-face. We have to acknowledge that the online environment is going to impact and materially change how we engage with our students and what they're going to produce. And that can be really exciting just for expanding out the range of possibilities that maybe we might not have considered if we were sticking with deploying high impact practices in a solely local or on-campus set of operations.
Yeah, I love that you're focusing on what we gain and those opportunities. To shift over though, what do you feel are the biggest challenges that online learners and instructors and administrators face when they try to do this work?
So I'd say there are two big challenges, and one of them is one you've spoken to already, Amy, which is around access. So I'd say the first big challenge we might want to be mindful of is students' differing levels of access to Wi-Fi and to particular kinds of devices. I think if there's anything we've really learned from emergency remote instruction during COVID, it's that access gaps for students still remain so large. So when we are thinking about the kinds of engagements we have with students online, we really need to be mindful that not all students have enough Wi-Fi access to engage equally in high bandwidth operations like synchronous video calls, or we might not be able to assume that all students can record and upload video easily or quickly. Similarly, we can't always assume that all students are going to have equal device access. So some students might be doing all their coursework on their phones. Sometimes faculty are worried about that, and that's sometimes the only device that students really have access to. So when we're designing high impact practices in online environments, we really want to think about how our assignments might scale flexibly to different levels of Wi-Fi access, or even across different kinds of devices, so that all students do have an opportunity to engage. That's possible. There's lots of great literature on mobile learning and low bandwidth online teaching. We just have to be flexible and open to imagining what different levels of access point might look like. The second big challenge I just want to underscore here is an information literacy challenge too. So if we want to think really big about students writing for larger publics or assignments that might involve stakeholders outside the institution, we want to make sure that everyone, students and instructors alike, have an understanding of basic data privacy issues and basic security issues. So once we start opening up work to other individuals, we want to make sure students are mindful of who their work is being seen by, that students have agency to decide when, how, and where they want to share their work online. And no work online is really truly private, but we want to give students choices about how much visibility they really want to give into their work. While also as instructors being mindful of concerns with FERPA, which for those of you who aren't familiar, FERPA is federal law that protects students from having their grades or graded information visible to anyone beyond the class community. So I want to think about assessment concerns as part of this as well, so that we're not inadvertently violating students' privacy in a number of ways. These are things we can learn and that have been really well documented. And so while these are challenges to consider and be mindful of, both from an equity and access perspective, we have a lot of opportunities to bring in lots of students and to help them become more mindful digital citizens while employing high impact practices online at our institutions.
Yeah. And if I could push you, so one challenge I hear a lot from instructors is that high impact practices are so reliant on experiences, and they're just not sure how they create an experience in an online environment. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Sure, I'd be glad to. And I completely understand that concern. It's really hard to replicate the things we do in person sometimes. I will say that when we are in person, it's sometimes easy to assume that everyone is equally experiencing an in-person experience. The fact of the matter is, I don't think it's ever been the case that even in an in-person experience, we're all having the same embodied reaction or even having the same embodied moment, because our bodies are different, our perspectives are different. That's not to say that there isn't value to those in-person experiences, even if we experience them differently. But the point is that moving online won't necessarily mean that we lose all the magic of an experience, because an online experience is also embodied. It's just embodied differently. So I think what I would encourage faculty who are worried about losing the experiential component of their high impact practices to consider is, what kinds of experiences are possible to create online? Are there ways to sort of blend those embodied in-person experiences with the scale and networking capacity of being online to make this concrete? We could go really high tech, right? Imagine things like the possibility for virtual reality or augmented reality kinds of experiences when teaching learning online. To go really low tech, we could imagine bringing in embodied experience by creating photo galleries of experiences that students could bring in, or simply by connecting through blog networks. Those are all kinds of embodied experiences that might seem like they just sort of live in virtual space, but that still might be really meaningful and really impactful for students, even if it's not fully in a brick and mortar space.
Mhm. Well, thank you so much. I know I have at least a half dozen ideas for potential proposals. I hope our viewers feel the same. And we look forward to developing those ideas in this February workshop series and seeing great presentations on online learning and high impact practices at next year's HIPS in the State. So thank you so much, Janae.
Thanks, Amy, and thanks everyone for watching. Good luck with putting together your proposals.